Footsteps in the pine trees, we hunt other than deer. The frost is white upon my skin, the air is cold, the air is thin. Run through the valley and over the hill, it's the unforgettable thrill of hunting Moomin, of hunting Moomin. Are heavy as well as our packs. Our eyes scan the ground, will we soon find their tracks? The frost is white upon my skin, the air is cold, the air is thin. Run through the valley and over the hill, it's the unforgettable thrill of hunting Moomin, hunting Moomin. Back at the cottage, clean ourselves with steam. Resting in front of the fire, I soon fall into a dream. The frost is white upon my skin. Right, hello, let's see if I've got the microphone on correctly. And I've done some rearranging in the room, so the cameras are not in the perfect position yet. I keep tinkering with stuff. I think it's a problem that a lot of people in engineering and particularly software engineering have, which is that we can't leave things alone. It probably explains why Microsoft keeps moving the menu items in Microsoft Word around from release to release, for example, because you think it's going to be better and you forget about the fact that actually people get used to stuff and they they don't want it to change unless there's a good reason to. So hi, welcome to the Orthoverse Is Doomed stream number 4 now. So it's been a month and I've learned an awful lot about streaming. It's been a good exercise. Today I'm going to explore a few interesting areas in the Orthoverse and tell a story about them, and I intend to talk a bit about Web3 authentication, in fact authentication and authorization in general. So let's switch to the there we go. There you see, I've disappeared off the camera because I moved it and I haven't bothered to check that that made sense. Anyway, so there we go, that camera's that one, and we've got this one here, and I can now move that up a little bit more sensibly, and there I am actually looking at the, well, it looks like I'm looking at the actual game screen, but I'm actually looking at the preview of the screen. So authentication, well, let's start off with how you authenticate yourself in the Orthoverse. And I have to add, at the moment it's not perfect, it's still a work in progress, but it certainly works as a proof of concept. You hit play, you hit log on with MetaMask, and what happens is MetaMask pops up a message to be signed. And if you look at the message, I've stuck some ASCII art in it to make it absolutely clear that this is not a crypto transaction that is being signed. It's a text message, and therefore there should not be any risk involved in signing it. And to be honest, I don't know why more Web3 sites that present things to be signed like this don't stick some ASCII art in. It's a very simple way to make it clear that it's not a transaction, and much more so than the ones that I see other sites use. So keep an eye out for that. Maybe over time you'll see other sites using this approach to signing to log on, and then you'll know that it started here in the Orthoverse and everybody else copied it. Right, so I'm going to sign that. So what it is there's this text component here. It's got the date and time, and at some point in the future we'll use that so that you need to re-authenticate after, say, a day or a week or something like that. And there's a random number, and that is there to ensure that the same thing is not being reused time and time again. It's I think the analogy there is when you have a festival and they have a bracelet for you to get in, they change the color every year, so you can't use previous year's bracelet in order to get into this year's festival. So you can think of that random number working like that. So I click sign, and all's well and good. I'm now in, and we can check that, because if I go off, yeah, so here I am in Fangwenina, which is owned by the address that I signed the authorization with, and you see that I've got a build bar down there. Oh, and I see we've got, well, looks like we've got 5 people here. That's great. Good to see you, Andy Martin and Leo Stalick and John Rigler, who I believe briefly appeared in the Orthoverse world and then disappeared again. So maybe, John, you could tell us what it was that caused you to... Did you get kicked out, basically? Oh, and you're back again. So I'd be interested to hear the story as to why Skippy von Unzelmund left the game and joined it again. What was the issue? I'm seeing a few people do that. One thing I'm wondering is that I think some people are disappearing out of it because they go into this world. It looks similar to other voxel games, like, for example, Minecraft, and there's the F5 key to change your perspective, whether it's first person or third person, and so they hit F5, but on a web browser, F5 is refresh the page. So John Rigler says, I keep getting kicked off. Yeah, I won't be able to debug that right now, because I think that would take up the entire session and would probably be rather dull for other people. So I apologize for that, John. I do need to work out what is happening there. If you could let me know what operating system you're using. I mean, I'm assuming it's Linux in your case, but I know that Windows was having problems like this earlier. And the other thing you could do, of course, is try a hard reload. So call up if you're using Chrome, hit Control-Shift-I, and then go to the refresh button, so that this thing, and right-click on it, and it'll give you the opportunity to empty the cache and reload. So it's possible that there's still a small memory leak, and if you've had the Orthoverse running for a long time, maybe the cache has got overfull and it's crashing. It's a possibility. I'm not 100% sure that it will be that. So John Rigler says this is Windows, right? So that could be part of the problem. I did change the timeout because there was a problem with Windows Edge hitting the connection timeout before Edge would respond. Maybe I need to bump that up even further, but I can't really do that tonight. If you've got Chrome and if you've got Linux, that's the most stable at the moment. And, if you haven't, well, then I guess Skippy von Unzelmond will be joining and leaving like a yo-yo. But I will look into this over the next week or two, because I think it's important to solve. Right, I was talking about authentication and authorization, and I think the first thing worth noting, let's start moving around and changing the scenery. The thing to notice about authentication and authorization is that although we use these analogies of, for example, it being like getting into your hotel room with your key card, or gaining access to a nightclub by showing your ID and proving that you're old enough, things like that, it's not really what is going on, because we talk about logging on to a system, and it makes it sound like indeed you've got into it somehow and you are resident there now. But when you think about it, if you have a web browser and you have a back-end server, and the two of them are communicating asynchronously across a network, and they establish a kind of dialogue where they're sending messages backwards and forwards to each other, and that's going over the internet, so it's going over a public communication channel. And so therefore, there's a whole bunch of levels of things that need to be established. So the first one is that the server and the client need to be sure that they are continuing to talk to each other from sentence to sentence. And in web, we have this HTTPS protocol, a secure protocol. You have HTTP, which is not secure. And both of those, if you want to ensure that the server knows it's still talking to the same web client, you need to have some kind of authentication per message. And I'm not sure this is the clearest explanation I've ever given, to be honest. Let's back up a bit. What do we mean by authentication and authorization? So authentication is you proving that you're the same person in this communication that you were in the previous one and the one before that. So it's to kind of give you persistence on a server. So you have your user account on a computer, you may have a user account on a website, and so on and so forth. And really what the server is doing, or your computer is doing, is ensuring that it's giving you the stuff that it was giving you before. So on your own computer, you log in, you get access to your own file system, you can see your files. You don't want to log in and find you're seeing somebody else's files and not your own. And similarly, you don't want somebody else logging in and seeing your files rather than theirs. And it's the same when you have a web account. So you've set up a Facebook profile. When you log in, you want to ensure that you get your profile and not somebody else's, and that somebody else can't get your profile instead of theirs. So in a sense, that's kind of a persistence of identity. The idea there is that over time, you are the same person logging on again and again and again. And it turns out that there are actually a fairly limited number of ways in which you can prove you are who you are, that you're the same person who was there last week or yesterday. And the most common one, the first one that was used in, I think it was the 60s in MIT, when they started having user accounts on computer systems, is to have a username. So that's like you having a human name that you're called by, and to have a password. And the idea is that the password is something only you have and nobody else does, and as a result you can use that to prove to the server that you are indeed you and it's not somebody else. But the password has to be secure because you don't want people to crack it, and passwords get leaked. People tell them to people pick poor ones, and in the I would say early days, but people are still doing this. You have a problem where if you have your password, then the server needs to somehow be able to verify that you've given it the correct password. And what they used to do was they kept a copy of your password on the server. And then if somebody hacked into the server, they could get that password, and now they can pretend to be you. So they changed that so that you don't store the password, you store what's called a hash of the password. So it's a way of taking a hash function, takes an input like a password or a sentence or whatever, and it uses an algorithm to mangle it up in a predictable manner to create a new output that looks completely different from the input, but could only be generated if the correct input is provided. So that way, and it can't go the other way. You can't take the mangled output and kind of unscramble it to get the original password. So it allows you to verify when somebody's given you something that they're giving you the correct thing, but you don't actually have to keep the correct thing on your server. You can keep this hashed version on your server. So anyway, I think we're getting a bit too technical here, but the first idea was, yeah, we can have passwords, and then that is something you know. Then we talk about things that like something you have, which might be a key or a dongle that you have to plug in, although the thing that you have will actually itself be using something it knows in order to be able to authenticate. So I'm not 100% sure that there's something you know, something you have, something you are breakdown as a way of identifying yourself is a great way to describe these things. The third one is this something you are. So we talk here about biometrics, for example, your fingerprint or your iris or something like that. But it kind of, you can get involved in philosophy and say, well, it's something you are, but if you're unlucky, criminals could cut your thumb off, and now instead of your thumbprint being something you are, it's now something that the criminals have. So, and yet it's still the same fingerprint. So there's something odd going on there in terms of the meaning behind all that stuff. Anyway, so this is the thing that you're using to prove that you are indeed who you say you are, and that gives you a persistent identity on a server. However, then there's the next thing up, which is that that means you can establish an identity in a file system on the server, but it's the server that is prompting you to put in, it may be providing you with a new username, it may even be suggesting a password for you, which is not a good idea. You should always pick your own password. But it's in control of it. It's keeping your details on the server. And to be honest, most of the time, all these details are not really even necessary. I mean, they like to have your email, and they say it's so they can send you a way of resetting your password if you forget it. But it's also convenient because it gives them some data, and the more data they gather, the more valuable that becomes in aggregate, and they can start selling it on to advertisers, for example. So in Web3, you saw that I was signing a message, and that is a challenge response thing. The server is saying, here's a message for you to sign it with your private key, and send it back to me. And then when it goes back to the server checks the signature, and it can use the signature not to get the private key, that's not going to be revealed, but it can use it to determine the public key and check that, the message was indeed signed. It's like mathematically proven that the message was signed by somebody who had, in my case, this address here. I'm going to copy that. Do I have a notepad that I can show? Text editor, there we go. Let's call up a text editor and stick it in there. So that's my public address. That's like my username in the Web 2 world. It's not a particularly memorable one, doesn't skip off the tongue neatly, but it's my name on the blockchain, and it's the name that the Orthoverse is going to use to remember who I am. So in a sense, that's my public identity. Now, the neat thing about this is something that I know is the private key that can be used to create this public key, and I'm using the private key to sign the challenge message, which then goes back to the server. The server checks that it's been signed by the private key corresponding, or that can be used to derive this public key, and that then makes the server happy that I am indeed in control of that address. And the really neat thing about this is I created that private public key pair myself, and the mechanism for signing in, all the functionality stuff, is in my blockchain wallet. And the fact is, this technology has been around for decades, so we could have had this kind of authentication system for the World Wide Web back in 1990 if we'd wanted to. But the problem was that blockchain wallets weren't particularly common. In fact, they were non-existent, and now they're getting more and more common. And I think this is the thing that is exciting to software developers, is now there's this thing in the browser that can be used to perform all this stuff that used to be handled by public key infrastructure, PKI stuff, that wasn't common, that people had to go to an awful lot of effort to install and set up, and that required typically a DevOps or an admin to set up for them. I think I'll just have a little walk around and see here. So we've got some people here. Voliftin left the Orthoverse. I wonder if people are getting kicked off again. Hey, Skavokful. These names are being generated automatically, by the way. It's a form of generative text art. I went through the Icelandic Elder Eddas and picked out a whole bunch of elf and dwarf names and chopped them up into syllables, and then randomly pick them and reassemble them. And sometimes it produces familiar names, and sometimes it produces ones that are a little bit odder. What was I going to do? I was going to go and visit an interesting place in the Orthoverse. I'm taking a break from talking about authentication because I think I need to think a bit more about the analogy that I'm going to use to describe it. So while I'm doing that, let's go on a little sightseeing tour. So we're now on the Southeast Island, teleporting, and I'm now going to go was it? It's actually not southeast. I want to go southwest. So I was talking about how I have a public key, and I'm the person who owns the private key that creates that public key, and I can use it to sign stuff. An interesting thing is that these various lands also, in a sense, have public keys, because the address that initially minted the token for the land, the token takes as its identifier their public key, because a public key is actually just a rather big number. It happens to be presented in hexadecimal, which makes some people forget that it's a number, but it's a number. And so whereas most NFTs are indexed starting with 1, and then the next NFT that's minted gets 2 and 3 and 4 and so on, what I did was say, well, each token is minted by an address, and it'll have the ID equal to that address. That means each token will get a unique ID. It also means that most tokens have very large numbers for their IDs. So, and why that's significant will become obvious in a little bit when I get through this science fiction area and I get to a rather interesting land, if I'm heading in the right direction. God, there's a lot of sci-fi buildings here. Right, I'm going to have to check. We've got E2 Fang Barada there. So, oh, John Wriggler's asking, can we teleport? You can teleport using the Orthoverse. You can teleport if you're an admin, I believe, except that even I'm not one at the moment. But ordinary people can't. And I'm working on improving the speed at which you can move around the Orthoverse, because when I started I kind of wanted the tokens that were near to the Orthohenge to be more easily reached, and that people had to go to a bit of effort to get to their land if it was further away. But I'm starting to think it's too much of an effort, and certainly you know, we're heading up for 2,000 tokens minted. If all 10,000 do get minted, then there are going to be people who are going to have to walk for 3 or 4 minutes to get to their land, and I don't think they're going to be happy with that. Right, carry one fear. Let's find out where I am. So here's the map, Orthoverse.io's map. Carry one fear. Ah, John Ray, no, Leos Stalik is saying he actually ran around the edge of the Orthoverse this afternoon. Leos, that's actually very handy for me. I got about 70% of the way around, and then I messed up and managed to end up inside a mountain, and I couldn't get out, and I couldn't be bothered to go through the whole hassle of continuing my walk. But the reason why this is useful to me, Leos, is because the world is kind of generated as people visit parts of it. So if there's a land that's never been visited before, it doesn't exist in a sense on the hard drive. I mean, it exists as an NFT, it exists as a concept in the minds of people who know about the token, but there's no data stored in the file system for what the land should look like. And what happens is when you walk onto the land, the server software wants to send a description of the land to the client software, i.e. your web browser, and first it checks the file system to see if there is data in a file, a world file, that describes what the land looks like, where all the blocks are and stuff like that. If it doesn't find that, then it generates the land using a function. And in fact, that will be a nice segue into what I want to show next. So I'm currently in Carry One Fear, which is this rather nondescript land here, and this is where I want to head to. So I want to head 2 lands east and 1 north to the land of Aranica. And you probably already noticed that there's something interesting about Aranica. I nearly made it onto the top of some trees. So Aranica has a rather odd layout of features, and once I get there, I will actually tell you why that is. Oops. Oh, I hate it when I go in the water. It's so slow. So, That's quite a lake. Right, yes, here I am in Aranica. So you noticed that Aranica consists of a lot of hills. See that? It is the hilliest land in the Orthoverse. So there's a little fact for you. If there's ever a quiz with the Orthoverse featuring as the chosen topic, one quiz question could be, which land is the hilliest? So then you may ask, well, why is that? You know, the other lands have a mix of mountains and lakes and forests and stuff like that, and Aranica has all these hills. And the answer is that the ID of the land of Aranica, somebody managed to find a bug in our first NFT smart contract, which allowed them to mint tokens for addresses that they didn't own and have the token transfer to their wallet. So that meant that they could pick a land with whatever public key they liked, and it would have the ID that they picked. And what this person did, and what gave it away to me and Richard, is that we ended up with this land of Aranica with all these hills. And what I'm going to try and do now off the top of my head, actually I will cheat. I will go to looks rare to look it up. So we want to go to the Orthoverse, and we just pick. Yeah, we'll look for Aranica. Arabica, Aranica. There we go. So here you can see that, okay, there's a bit of mountain and lakes and stuff like that at the bottom, but it's pretty hilly. And we have a token ID. And so if I go to orthoverse.io/API/ oh gosh, no, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I need to find the metadata, don't I? Maybe. Yeah, that's just the contract. I don't want to go and look at the contract. Maybe I can query it. So go to the contract, read a contract. I will get the I want to get the URI for a token, and I put in a token ID. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. There we go. Query it. So I'm now actually going to a blockchain explorer, examining what the blockchain explorer I found the Orthoverse NFT contract, and I'm now querying the Orthoverse contract. Okay, John Wriggler's asking, I'm on a Mac now and was able to walk around. I am in Unmark. Is there a way for me to save so that I will be here when I log back on? So yeah, your location is stored in the client in persistent storage and on the server. So it should be that if you just close your browser and open it up again, you should start exactly where you left off, provided you log on, authenticate with the same address. Then yeah, except yes, so here's the problem. We haven't done user accounts yet. At the moment we are just using the authentication part to check that you do own various tokens, and so therefore you can edit them. The details of where you are, what your name is and stuff like that are stored in local storage in your web client. And what Richard and I need to do is we need to move that so that those details are then copied across to the server database, and then the next time you log in with the same address, it'll overwrite what's stored locally in your web client if your details are different from what is on the database. So we're not quite there yet. As long as you use the same Mac, or if you know how to actually copy local storage in the web client from web client to web client, then you can keep that consistency. But if you log off, if you close it down your Mac, John, and then go back to your Windows machine, it'll have you being where you were on the Windows machine because it's stored your location there, which also gives you a clue that you may well be able to change your location in the Orthoverse quickly if you really want to poke around in the guts of the system. We will be locking that kind of stuff down in a bit, but for now there's actually quite an amazing amount of stuff you can do if you poke around in the JavaScript that makes this system work. Right, okay, anyway, back to the token. So here we are. I've looked up a metadata for one of the Orthoverse tokens, and you can see you've got latitude, longitude, realm, castle level, all that stuff, and image. And the image is itself another HTTP link. And if I copy that and paste that into here, we'll get an image. And here you can see that we have a lot of hills and then we have a lot of water. And the reason for that is that it's down to the initial configuration of a land is determined by its ID. And its ID is, if I just highlight it, is the number, which itself was a copy of the public key of the address that minted the token. So if you happen to have the private key to a public key that was this number that I've highlighted, then you would end up with a land that looked like that, and in fact would have the name Aranica because it's the name is also constructed from the public key. So if I go into this and I say change this into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Is that the right length? Yeah. So here you can see we have mountain, lake, field, for deciduous forest, and a lush field. So 1 is a mountain, 2 is a lake, 3, and so on and so forth. And then the first 36 of these characters define the 36 fields, and then the final 4 are used to define the name of the land. And that's how the land token appearance and the land token name is constructed from the public key that minted the token in the first place, and that corresponds with the token's ID. I hope this is making sense to people. I'm not having any comments from people, but I guess it is, and if you want me to dig into any of that more deeply, I can, but on the other hand, maybe people don't want me to be going on about that forever. So yeah, if we change this 2222 to 3333, the name hasn't changed, so obviously I misremembered exactly what part it is where the name is set. It's somewhere in that part. Let's try the next ones. 3333. Nope, name still hasn't changed. So I wonder where it's going to be. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You've got to get the length exactly right to complete. Okay, so the name is coming from somewhere in that string of 4s. I thought I'd tacked it by using the stuff at the end, but clearly I haven't. Anyway, so in a sense, the address that mints the token becomes the token's ID, and then the token ID is kind of used as a seed to generate the features and name of the land. And because somebody found a bug, they were able to mint a token with an ID that they never should have been able to, and transfer it to themselves, and we let them keep it as a reward for managing to do that. And as a result, we had to upgrade the contract in February. Me and Richard had quite a scramble to try and fix it, because we wanted to get that one knocked on the head as soon as possible. And as far as I'm aware, we haven't had any hacks or mistakes since, mainly because when we started the Orthoverse and we had our slogan, "The Orthoverse is Doomed," we also didn't do any proper testing. We sort of said, let's not do any of the stuff that you should normally do when you have an NFT project, and that included not testing. And we found out pretty quickly that no matter how good a coder you are, and Rich is a very good coder, you will have bugs. and I'm a mediocre coder, so I will have lots more bugs. And so as a result, for the second contract, we actually wrote a proper test suite that covered the whole all areas of functionality that were visible, plus a whole bunch of extra cases that I came up with just in case somebody was fiendishly creative out there. So I'm not saying that the Orthoverse contract is flawless. Nothing ever is in software, and there are always amazingly subtle bugs that come to light over time. I think even in Unix, where there are commands that are 40 years old, occasionally a bug is still found after all this time. So the systems are just too complex, right? Well, not too complex. The systems are complex, and it's not possible to make sure that the stuff is going to work flawlessly. There will always be corner cases and bugs and unforeseen circumstances that mean that the system won't work quite as expected. Anyway, so there you go. That's the story behind Aranica, the hilliest land in the Orthoverse. There are a few other interesting lands that you can spot. I think Richard and I took advantage, in fact there's one here, of the bug to sneakily generate a couple of interesting tokens for ourselves. So we have a floating castle, and I wonder if I can't spot it quickly off the top of my head. Somewhere around here of course there's the author henges, although that uses a different technique to present itself in a different way. And no, nothing's, that one's got a surprising number of pits in the top right corner, but I don't think that is a hack or anything. I think that's just pure fluke. If you have enough randomly generated lands, some of them will end up with a surprising number of a particular feature turning up. Here's a nice land, for example, that has one of the biggest forests, and that reminds me, my kids actually had a fun half hour or so where the two of them had two web browsers open, and they were sort of setting themselves competitions, like how many castles with 3 towers are there in the Orthoverse, and where's the biggest forest, and what's the longest route you could walk in the treetops, was one that they were trying, where if you, for example, if you look here, you could start walking in these trees. We count diagonal as acceptable too, so you could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's a chain of 10 treetops you could walk along, and I can't remember what number they came up with. I think it was like 14 or something like that. I would have expected it to be bigger, to be honest, but then again, they're just kids. They probably didn't spend an awful lot of time on it. And of course, the ideal thing to do would be to automate detecting this kind of stuff. You can play the same thing with mountains. If you're only allowed to walk on mountains, what's the longest journey you can make? Yeah, so lots of fun to be had in the Orthoverse if you like walking in the tops of trees. So I was going to go and visit some areas where people had built stuff, and I had actually looked up, because I could look up on the server the addresses of various lands that had been built on, and I did that, and then you translate it to the name, and then you search for the name in here, and you look it up, and then you go to it. But I forgot to jot them down, so if anybody has done some building and isn't ashamed of it, you could always put your name in the chat, and I might actually go and visit it. You may actually be featured in a live stream if you do so in the next 15 minutes or so. Right. Oh, that reminds me, I was going to talk, there was one particular thing I wanted to talk about, which is, if we go to here. So I was working on Friday night on extending Fangwanina. I shall go there now. Say hello to Charunish at the same time. Oh, Charunish is running away. Okay, Leos asks, is there a wormhole to end up out there in the space outside of the map? He was trying to see if he could see a hole in the wall around the edge of the Orthoverse, but no luck, of course. Well, no, to the best of my knowledge, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to run all the way around. It should be a a barrier of bedrock all the way around that should be impenetrable, and therefore you should not be able to get past the wall at the moment. But when I first implemented it, I had made a mistake, and in the very northwestern corner there was a one land wide gap where it was just randomly creating lands that repeated. There were like 2 different land tiles, and it repeated them as you walked along, and they were both bordered, and that was really neat. But then I made a few more fixes, and then that disappeared, and I couldn't remember how I managed it. So because I was thinking of reintroducing that, having an infinite corridor, kind of like I don't know if you've read Larry Niven's Ringworld, so to be like Ringworld. But no, as far as I'm aware, there's no way through at the moment. Of course, this is the neat thing about a game. I could always add a wormhole at the edge of the world at some point in the future if I felt like it. I can write specific code for specific non-owned tokens or lands. So John Riegler said, I built some stuff before, but it didn't seem to save. Okay, that's an interesting one, because I've done quite a bit of testing on saving. I have found some problems, but not being able to save hasn't been one of them. You do need to have at least a level 1 token to be able to save. You can't save if you've got, you can build if you've got a level 0 token, but if you want to save it, you need to have a level 1 that gives you 1 slot right up to level 7, which gives you 7 slots to save in. Okay, so what I did, you can see here I've got the beginnings of a tower. Now earlier yesterday, this was actually complete. I actually had a nice complete tower with a I'd actually worked out how to make a sort of onion dome, like here in Finland we have the like there are Russian Orthodox churches and Romanian Orthodox churches are the 2 common ones, and they typically have the onion dome shape, but you know, sort of a Slavic design. So I'd managed to make that kind of shape for the top of the tower, and then I went to save what I had done, but I accidentally loaded it instead and therefore overwrote it. And I've now done this about 3 times, which suggests that it is a real problem, that people people will be saving when they mean to load or loading when they mean to save, and both of those are bad things to do. So that's a really clear indicator to me that there needs to be a confirmation. So when you hit like here, if I hit 7 at the moment on my keyboard, I get saved current state of Fanguanina. It should really confirm, because when you're saving or when you're loading, you're changing something, and you may lose some data that you don't want to lose. So I'll have to, I think it needs to be a yes/no confirmation. I'll have to come up with some kind of zone, but I don't want it to be too intrusive, because it's really annoying when you know you want to be protected, but you don't want to be protected to the extent that your life gets really tricky and annoying, and you're having to click a load of stuff that you don't want to. So any suggestions for designs on how to make sure that I don't accidentally overwrite my saved world or load in a world rather than save all the edits I've made would be useful for people to point some of those out to me. Or maybe you know someone who's done this. Right, so what I can do is I can go and add in a few more blocks. Let's see, I don't have any polished diorite here. Yeah, let's go up and do the roof. That's probably fun. So yeah, so it's actually, if we go over here, we can have a quick look. It's coming along nicely. I've built walls around half, so there's 4 sides to a land. Oh, where are we? I've gone too far and I need to go west. So I've built walls around 2 of the 4 sides of my land. So the intention here is that I will eventually have completely encircled my land in walls, and with just a few gateways here and there to enter. So I think that should be fun. Let's go on a tour of the walls. There we go. Up, up. There we are. Do I have any? direct wall. I could add a few more of these features in while I'm at it. No, I only had one. Right. So here we are on the east side of Fanguanina. And yes, I can make it up there. And then we have so this would be the east gate. And then we have, so you see, the land seemed very big to me, and when I first started building on it, and now it feels quite small. And I did give up a space to the, you know, I could have made it a 6x6 wall, but it's actually a 5x6 wall. I've left this red area here. Does technically belong to Fanguanina, but I haven't built on it. I didn't build the wall all the way to the edges. I will be doing on the other three sides though. So this was meant to be like a barracks for guards or something like that. This reminds me of a Finnish sauna actually. The benches along the wall. Maybe I should put one of those stoves in the center. So that's the castle sauna. That would be amusing. I've got these tower wooden bits here, which suggests that I was going to build a roof on it, like the towers over there have. But I didn't do so. I think I prefer it plain anyway for things like that. Right. So there's the village houses. I wonder if I can. Nope. Ooh, that was a bit dizzying. So I'm going to build a few more villages, a few more, not villages, houses. I want to have the this to feel a bit more like than just 3 houses, and I built a tavern over here, so that one was a bit bigger. I'd like to have a couple more houses at least, and then we have the keep or the castle of the. So the idea is that the king would live there. If you have a closer look, you'll see that I accidentally made one of the roofs 1 block lower. One on the tiled roof on the right is 1 block lower than the one on the left. It's asymmetrical. That was unintentional, but I actually quite like it now. It's a bit quirky, so I think I'll be leaving that. Yeah. So it's just a little bit every weekend. Add a few extra features and stuff like that, and it starts to build up over time. And you know, so hopefully in the space of about half a year or so, I should have a full medieval metropolis springing up over here, which I think will be fun. Plus, you can start putting little hidey things in, and of course, once you've built all your surface, if you decide to do what I've done and build a wall around everything. There is the underground, and when you think about it, here I'm building stuff that's maybe, I mean, let's have a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's like maybe 20 blocks high, 30 blocks high. The ground goes 41 blocks down. So you can build a system of caverns and underground cellars and labyrinths and stuff like that underground. And similarly, you can dig up stuff from underground and build up. So if you wanted to, you could, for example, build a cloud castle. So build a tower up. Let me show you how that works. That would give you building space in the air, and maybe I should do that next. Have maybe Fanguanina should have a floating castle. Yeah. So normally blocks need to be placed on blocks. So if we go like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. But what I can now do is I could build around it like this. Come on, place that block. That's not a good sign if it's not placing blocks, is it? There we go. Just not hitting the right spot. Yeah. Right. And now if I do this, cut that away. There we go. I now have a levitating collection of blocks. Now do that 10 or 20 times bigger and you could have a floating castle. Right, so I don't think anybody has done anything worth visiting then. If I think I saw Leos's digging around to find bricks and building a tower extra. I think I did see that on one of the lands. Someone had built a big castle-like thing made out of coarse dirt. So whoever was mining there hadn't dug down deep enough in order to get to the good stuff. Because if I show you, if I will go. This land, I'm afraid, is a little bit messed up underground, because I've done a lot of building and then things started going wrong. And when I fixed them, this had some old design stuff. It's a long and rather dull story that I won't go into at this time. So if I go south to the land of Grow Murphy, I can demonstrate. So here's Grow Murphy, and if you dig from the top, initially there's dirt and granite, and until you get 10 deep, and then you hit some red stuff. These are red steps and red blocks, and then if you go down more, we've got red slabs, and then you get cobblestone and cobblestone walls and cobblestone slabs, and then we get stone. Then we've got spruce wood, and we've got oak wood and birch wood. So there's this whole underground area of blocks that you can mine. So it's not dirt all the way down. So there are resources underground that you can use to get whatever kind of blocks you want. It's not. There we go. That's better. Right. So here, for example, we've got a huge collection of diorite walls, which would be perfect for my that wall that I was working on earlier. Right. There, this kind of stuff. There's a fair amount of this kind of stuff in the user manual. I think it mentions this, but I don't. It's difficult to decide what to reveal, to be honest, because you want to keep some mystery and secrets, because there's the fun of discovering stuff, but you also don't want people just giving up and going away because they haven't found anything interesting. And it's the challenge of the game developer, really, I suppose. But the problem we have here is this isn't a game in the traditional sense, and you want enough to engage people with at the beginning, but you also want them to discover stuff over time. So I don't want to give all the mysteries away. Yeah, so there you go. So there's a huge underground resource, and I'm surprised, Leos, when you say you did not dig that deep, because you strike me as the kind of person who would ask themselves, the first question they would ask themselves is, how deep can I dig? And has he forgotten to put bedrock at the sort of impenetrable rock at the bottom of the world, to allowing you to fall out? So up. Right, anyway, so that's the underground resources. Let me head back to Fang Wanina. So one of the things I'm thinking about doing is making night a lot shorter. This is another thing that, as somebody building in this world, I mean, it's nice to have daylight and night should be longer than 5 seconds. But I'm thinking it might be twice as long as it should be. So, yeah, where were we? Yes, so here you'll see that I had this pit, and oh god, it's gone really dark now. I'm going to cheat. I can, as an op, do that and make it day. But if you're not a moderator, then you can't. So I had this little entrance here that most people will miss, and you can start to see how much I have mined. It's quite there's like caverns that go on and on and on to all the way down there. So there's a huge, and I started doing this, and then I realized afterwards that I've got several save slots. I should have one save slot just for a mining world where I change to it and I dig up all the stuff, and then I don't save it, so that when I go back there again, there's all the stuff's back there again. Instead, I've got my main build world, and it's got a huge number of underground corridors that I kind of wish weren't really there. Right. So there is a problem with walls when there's lots of them. You get this sort of weird shimmery effect. Walls are quite difficult, actually, and you'll see here that the walls connect. So maybe I can get a better view for you. Let's dig up a bit. Up. Yeah, there we go. So you see here that all the walls are like crosses. So they've got there's a central column, and then when there's a wall next to a wall, it's meant to connect, join, like that. But for some reason, with Orthoverse Prismarine, when you put a wall next to a wall, they don't connect. That connection doesn't appear, and I don't know why that is. I haven't solved that one yet. The other weird thing with walls is that you can kind of travel through them sort of, and then you get stuck. So I've just managed to achieve that now, and I'm going to dig my way out. And then the final one is that normally you can't place a block where there's already a block. So if I select smooth red sandstone, if I put it there, it builds in front of it. It doesn't replace this block with this one. But walls are different. When you place a wall on a wall, if you look at the number at the bottom there, you see it's I have 31 walls. If I start placing them, 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, they're not going anywhere. Oh, sorry, I've just been teleported through the ceiling again. So if you place a wall on top of a wall, sometimes you can pile them on top of each other, but sometimes it just overwrites it, and I haven't worked out the mechanism for it, because there's some clever stuff going on with the physics actually, and how it's interpreting what you're doing. In fact, we've got 5 minutes to go, so I'll just talk about stairs. This one took me ages to work out. Right, so if you're able to build and you pick a stair, here we go, direct stairs. If you click, they appear in front of you as if you want to run up them. So that's all very well and good. However, if you click to the, if you have a wall and you place stairs on it, there you see there they've been placed that way up. If you click underneath, they get placed this in an inverted manner. If you click at the front, let me find a better one to place it. So here, if I was to click here, I would get the stairs as we saw those previous ones. If I click here, it should be different. Yeah, there we go. So it's sort of got a way that it calculates which direction it's going to have them facing in. So you see I can make them kind of go point in whichever direction I like, depending on where I click and what direction I'm facing as I click. So here's another example. If I click now, the stairs are that way round. If I go here and click facing that way, they're in that direction, and so on. So it takes a bit of getting used to working out exactly how those stairs are placed. But once you get the hang of it, it's surprising. It's like it's a sort of interesting user interface actually. That you're kind of, the effect of what you're doing takes a whole bunch of extra stuff into account, and it becomes intuitive after a while. That's what I find really fascinating. That you have this simple interface, a mouse that can decide what you're which allows you to look at things. So you can see a little black square appearing around the particular thing that I'm looking at, and then a mouse click. And yet with those two options, being able to look around and a place button, you can actually control the arrangement and alignment and orientation of things with a much higher level of control than I would have initially guessed. Because my take would be, okay, you've got 2 dimensions with the mouse, north, up, down, left, right, and you've got a click event. How much can you really do with that, short of kind of adding things like double clicks or having special gestures? But it turns out even without gestures, which I find hard to remember, to be honest, you can still, by interpreting the meaning of the space that you're interacting with, you can affect how an object is placed. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty neat. It means that you've got even though this is a 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional space, you can interact with it as though you are in a 3-dimensional space yourself. Right, it is coming up to midnight here, and because we're in Eastern European time, so 2 hours ahead of Greenwich Mean Time, and that means I do need to wrap up, because at midnight I turn into a pumpkin, and you don't want to see that. Right, I'm not gonna save those demonstration builds. I'm gonna 7 is saved, so I need shift 7. You see, I nearly did it again. And there we go. So all that stuff I did is now disappeared because I loaded the old state. You can use loading quite maliciously in that you can load people into solid objects, but then they teleport upwards. So John Wriggler was asking, if I am level 1, what I gather from the guide is that if I press 1, then I can save. Yes, and if you press shift 1, you should load the thing that you saved. But you can only load or save once every 10 minutes. And the reason for that is that I'm concerned that the server might get overloaded by people loading and saving continuously. If you have a level 7 token, then you can load and save every 3 minutes. And when I say load and save, it's like you get a load or a save. So the idea would be save, build for 10 minutes, save again, build for 10 minutes, and then maybe after 5 minutes of building you decide that you're not happy with what you built, so you go and take a tea break, come back after 5 minutes, and then load your original thing in. This stuff is still all up for debate and design. It's just a matter that I want to be conservative on these kind of things, and I don't want to write stuff that I don't want to give people the opportunity to do stuff that irrevocably breaks the Orthoverse. So I'm being a bit conservative on saving, because people other than me may actually put a significant amount of work in building stuff, and I don't want them to wake up and find that their build is gone. Right, it is now midnight in Finland. I've had a great time again, guys. Thank you for joining me, for the questions. Hope you found this interesting, and tune in next Saturday evening at the same time, where another exciting installment of The Orthoverse Is Doomed should occur. That's it for tonight. Bye-bye. Unpredictable teachings keep me alive with the knowledge you give me. Keep me alive with your intellectual rigor. Keep me alive by keeping me with you. By those unknown reactions